Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Content and Conversation. Today I am joined by Ross Hudgens and my name is Drew Page. We're going to talk about interactives. So, interactive content like calculators, generators, those types of content in the world. Ross, I want to kick it off and ask you what makes something like why would you recommend doing interactives?
Yeah, I mean, there's many reasons to do interactives, and one of the things we preach here at Siege is a lot of people think of content and they're just like writing, and that's it,
Right.
right? And we think of content as design, UX. What am I missing? Animation. It all goes into it,
Right.
and that's just one piece of it. Interactivity has a lot of benefits uh, that add up to reasons why you would win over time. One big one is not a big uh, there is a big sunk cost.
Mhm.
So very often that means there's a high barrier to entry to doing that well, which is a pro and a con for you. But once you get that unlocked, you start doing them, you find a good developer. Very often that means your competitors are not going to be able to replicate that
Yeah,
very
it
easily.
differentiates
Right.
what you're doing.
Right. Anyone can find a writer on Upwork, whether or not they're good or not. But the strategy and execution of all of those things together often is one of the major reasons why interactive content is so worth doing.
Are there any considerations like against doing interactives?
Yes, I mean, it's for sure expensive.
Yep.
If you don't do it well or know how to do it, it can be risky. One of the things we recommend is don't just do interactivity for the sake of it. Don't listen to this podcast and then go make some post that makes no sense to be interactive.
Mhm.
I think that is a failure point that many people will do. I see it a lot with like really bad link bait, actually. They'll make fancy link bait interactive, but that very rarely is gonna pay back because maybe it gets some links, but it's not tied to search volume or any actual user experience in any kind of way. So that often adds up to some negative, outcomes.
Right, and, like, even sometimes when you see Google building tools in the SERP, how do you think is it still worth going after a keyword like that that has a search component built in?
It definitely should be more of a consideration. I think Hrefs and SEMrush have gotten better at showing the estimated click-through rate despite
Yep.
those things existing. I mean, I would think it through as a user, like, would I want this search? Would I still use this calculator Google has, or otherwise? Do I think they will? It should not also be current state. It should be future state. Do I think they could eventually add a calculator here
Right.
that would make me irrelevant? That could give you pause. But I think one thing that comes up with a lot of these calculators, it shouldn't just be a search play. Very often, it should be a user experience play. Like I would recommend, we've recommended to clients, you have no, it's not a very fun thing to say, but you have no hope of ranking for mortgage calculator any kind of like 1 to 2 year horizon.
Right.
But in your business model, you should still have a mortgage calculator.
Yep.
So that's enough justification to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think if you are competing with Google itself in the search, uh having differentiating yourself further by adding, could be data visualization charts and things of that nature without getting too complex. You still want the user experience to be perfect, flawless, not as much friction to value. Um, but yeah, how do you think about the calculator itself, building out various like complexities?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your industry, but some things you can consider are like, is this a code base you could reuse in some
Hmm.
way? So sometimes you could build page level features that are interactive that scale if they actually add value. Maybe it doesn't add value to just do one time, but if you know every single page on your website, you could do something interesting with that. That could justify that investment very often and make it scalable. Overall, other things we think about are in generally is a siege thing is the passive link intent with these things. Like, what are some of the metrics we've seen around calculators, Drew?
I mean, if you can get something to rank like that, a lot of people are going to look to cite those in their resource pages and like when it could be calculators, it could be generators. So I think of like the Shopify's of the world, building like business name generator. That's a helpful tool, and it segues into like a nice freemium model where you're kind of building a tool that's going to be helpful, and as long as it's relevant to your business in some way, and it can segue nicely into the product itself, I think it makes a whole lot of sense to build these, like it almost just feeds your freemium pipeline, basically.
Agreed, I mean, it's so we always have 2, like, strategies on 2 sides of the spectrum very often with link building. Is like, we'll lower friction to people to link to something by giving them nice visual assets.
Mhm.
A calculator, ironically, is the complete opposite. These get so many links because someone can't recreate this calculator to give it to their users,
Right,
so they'll just link out, because that friction to actually get on their site is so high as compared to just, like, listing off a definition that some people will research and combine that and not cite you. It's gonna be kinda hard not to do that with a good calculator or interactive of whatever state you go with.
right, and just to kinda tie it all together with a data-driven example here, mortgage calculator, Google actually has an element built in, but NerdWallet ranks number 3. They have 978 links built to that page, so almost 1,000 links, and the traffic value of that post is 636K. So even if Google's built-in tool is ranking, obviously, and there's still value to be had in this from links, from traffic value, and
On-site value,
yeah,
all of those things. Yeah, and maybe that's the kinda tie back is, like, these are probably the same thing. If you have on-site reason to have it because users just need it, there probably is search volume associated with it because users so need a mortgage calculator or a blank calculator, a retirement calculator if you offer 401ks, like, those kinds of things will naturally tie together in a nice way. So that will add up to warrant spending sometimes $10,000 plus just for this tool because it will give you that advantage for sure.
so we've said a lot about calculators. What other types of interactives are you familiar with, and have you seen success out of?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned generators. I think that's a good way to go. We've often just found other features that add value. So we'll occasionally create statistics posts that will allow you to copy the statistic, immediately share each individual statistic. It's kind of like that specific feature gives you that interoperability, if I pronounce that correctly, to make it more functional. Also, jump tos like table contents interactivity is still interactivity if you know that you had a big hub page, you want to get to specifically your sub use case, a good table of contents jump to that's clean and looks good is going to add value.
Yeah, and I think about, like, maps and being able to if you have state pages, like, having a hub of those and having an interactive maps you can click through. Hippo comes to mind with that, their state insurance calculators and things like that.
Yeah, that's a home insurance, website for people listening who's not aware of that, but yeah, those are great examples. Generators, I think, are common ones where you're looking for inspiration, that often can make sense for you. Filtering, I think, is a common use case, so we have jump tos. It's sort of another way of doing the same thing. Jump to will take you to the page. Filtering could be a giant list, maybe it's an even bigger list than normal,
Mm,
and you wanna get to it fast, so that could be like a list of unicorn startups or something like that, and things like that that have a big list, or also like maybe it's a Pinterest type setup where they're looking for, say, red ideas, and they instantly do that. Obviously, that's another level of interactivity that's not always possible, but those are some common ways to apply interactivity.
so I know we talked about the expense of creating a calculator or interactive content. While that does differentiate yourself in search and against competitors, how do you think about, like, evaluating time to value?
Yeah, I think so everyone who's winning is solving for that in the quickest possible way.
Yeah.
So you see the nerd wallets, the bank rates of the world, the world-class calculator kind of players. Their calculator is immediate above the fold. They will pre-fill elements to make them more useful. They'll guess your location. They'll say, "We're here in San Diego," to make it so I don't have to type in that location, and that all adds value to make that rank. So if you think about these calculators, some of them have the same answer. So they're gonna get you the same answer, they should get you the same answer. So how do you differentiate the same answer? It's often user experience and the time to that answer. So if you can get that same answer faster, you've technically provided a more optimal user experience that I think allows you to rank better, have a better brand experience, all of those things. So an example would be say you're ranking for mortgage calculator, you might default to say, "We're here in San Diego. Here's the average, we know it's a 30-year loan on average. Most people are gonna get a 30-year loan. We know the average home value is blank." Those things all kinda help me get to my mortgage, payment a lot faster than others, and I think it's probably why the sites that are ranking well, are winning almost always.
Yeah, so it just always comes back to creating a great user experience,
Yeah.
reducing friction, autofilling those values. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so we talked about reusing codebase, and I think it's worth just kind of exploring why that would be. So you can reuse that nice interactive statistics template that you've already built and then just build it out for other keywords to just see value compound from there. Anything else that you would say is worth exploring and thinking about when making interactive content?
Yeah, I mean, the jump tos with table of contents, that's something like generally blog design, whatever features factor in there. So often a table of contents that will follow you will technically be interactive and be something that scales out as a reusable code base. That's all a big element. I think the only thing I haven't really aggressively touched on so far is that these are some of the biggest passive link intent topics on the web.
Right.
Yeah, they make they're generating a ton of the we touched on it a little bit, but just to reemphasize, there's sites like NerdWall that we've dug into, and you look at their top linking assets, they're almost always calculators. And that's because people are so aggressively linking to them, and they make great user experiences. So you can't replicate that, yeah, for a holiday card website, most likely.
Right.
But if you're in finance, especially, this is something that really adds a lot of value.
Yeah, and just to again add a little bit more data there, their retirement calculator on NerdWallet is ranking number 1, has 1,900 links. I mentioned the mortgage calculator ranks number 3, 978 links, so a little bit lower, and then another car payment calculator ranks number 4, and it's 727 links. So you can just really see the clear ranking higher is gonna drive more passive links, and that's something that we've seen success with over and over again with those high link intent keywords.
For sure. And I mean, the overall TLDR here is like, I think of content as more than writing. I think interactivity is just one great way of doing that. But if it makes sense in your business, like go all in and make sure the stuff is great. It can very often be the backbone of an entire strong content marketing strategy.
One thing that I wanna ask, I've seen in some scenarios, pages that like, the keyword is calculator, but they actually don't have a calculator built. They just explain the equation. How do you think about that? Like, is it worth investing in interactivity if it's not necessarily needed?
I'd say eventually that website will lose. So they might be able to rank. I think there it's definitely true on lower competition queries. Maybe you're a high authority, you can
Mhm.
pull off ranking for those things, and I've seen it. One variant I've realized over time is actually calculator will be the term, but also how much does blank cost?
Right,
Very often a calculation. So sometimes I think Google might slightly preference text sometimes there, but you'll still see calculators rank on the topic. Those situations, you might be able to pull it off, but I think it's often a short-sighted view, but maybe it doesn't warrant spending 14,000 for your business, in which case that could be worth doing.
right. Yeah, and then would you think about, like I see them like that those cost calculators or, like, how much does X cost?
Mhm.
That's super bottom funnel. There's I'd say most calculators are in the middle of the funnel, but how do you think about bottom funnel pages in terms of calculators? Is it, branded? Like, how much does literally my company's product cost? Or what comparison pages, things like that?
Yeah, they to your point, they convert very well. Not only we talked about links, but there's no doubt that these are very often the most valuable topics. People will do the mortgage calculation and then they'll get a loan.
Right,
So that's a very common sequence for that topic. Not all will follow that sequence, but it's common to like actually run the calculation. Then you might you give them their number, and then you'll have some CTAs to loan products or what have you. So all of that I think does makes sense. I don't know that answer. What was your original question there?
yeah, just like bottom funnel to middle funnel, like, how do you think about, uh,
Yeah.
those types of content?
Yeah, I mean, another way to get value out of these, to your point there, Drew, is pushing that more often. So we have had clients who actually will build a calculator for them, and then we'll put it in posts a lot on lots of different posts of like run your costs for blank
Mhm.
as a calculator. That's rich content. Obviously, it'll give reason people to engage in. A general thing that is common with calculators in any conversion is the idea of a yes ladder, where you get people kind of inputting things,
Yep.
and eventually they won't say no because you've said yes so many times, right? So that's very common. I think one reason calculators also benefit people
And is there anything you think about, like scale wise? How many is there an upper limit of how much work, like you just said, the yes ladder, like how many rungs should there be on that ladder before it gets a little bit too overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, I would not fake it. It's probably whatever question actually gets to the answer. If the second you're adding answers just to keep saying yes,
Right.
that's probably not optimal. But if you can use the ladder intelligently, which is typically like you have one question and then it progresses to the next page versus seeing a giant form, which you'll see on bad pages with low time to value or high time to value, uh, that often will help you progress and won't feel as intimidating when you only have to answer one question very simply, and then the final step, you're asking for first name, last name, phone number, that kind of stuff that people don't wanna give out,
Well, I think looking forward, I think interactives make the web a better place, and I think that's one of our goals as a agency.
for sure.
So, looking forward to building more interactives in the future, and I hope everyone listening does as well. Anything else to add here, Ross?
Yeah, I would just say to kind of bring this full circle to make this podcast interactive, go to iTunes or your favorite service of choice, drop us a review, let us know what you thought, and that'll mean this podcast in particular was interactive just as we spoke to.
Check out our podcast calculator, interactive after this. It's a podcast generator. It just creates our voices and just keeps talking.
Great content.